And welcome to the show, Our Islam and Community Issues. Today we're doing part 2 of a subject matter that is hardly ever talked about, mental awareness through psychodrama. Now that's a tough title, but we got a tough brother here to deal with. We got Brother Wilson Jordan. Nice, thank you for coming on again. And over there we got Brother Benjamin Shabazz. We talked about some of the dynamics of psychotherapy. And it was very interesting. So don't let the title scare you. Let it move you, but not scare you.
Yeah.
All right. So we left off there. Let's just kind of continue on. Let's just do a brief what psychotherapy is, just real briefly, and then let's just get into the details that we were talking about the last program, if that's all right with you, sir.
Okay. All right. So the biggest difference is between talk therapy and psychodrama is in talk therapy you're dealing with one other individual, the therapist. In psychodrama, you're dealing with a host of people who are replicating or who are imitating people that you knew who behaved a certain way and who you responded to a certain way. So you may have 8 or 9 people up on the stage with you acting out roles of people who had influenced you. Whereas in just regular talk therapy, it's just you and the counselor.
Okay.
So it's based on the premise that all problems start because we have social interaction.
Okay.
So the psychodrama stage is a social interaction with various people.
Okay. I like this. Yeah. Okay. So let's say life is a stage, huh?
Life is a stage, and it never stops.
Never stops.
It never stops. The only thing that changes or may not change is how we respond or interact with it.
Okay. Benjamin, did you have some questions from the last session there? As you know, how I said session.
No, I'm anxious to get into your PowerPoints.
Okay.
So let's go. We have a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll go through that and just go at the speed that you would like to go at it.
Okay.
All right. So go ahead and get that PowerPoint. The first part started there, if all goes well. You can see it better.
Okay, can I turn it? Okay.
Yeah, be careful there. Yeah, that's why we have it on the back side there.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So mental awareness through psychodrama. I'm calling this a safe and intentional way to shift traumatic perspectives. Now, it doesn't matter what the traumatic perspective is, okay? It really doesn't. It doesn't matter if it happened in the war in Iraq, or if it happened between your brother and your sister, or if you were the middle child and nobody paid any attention to you, or if you were the first child and you had to take care of everybody else, nobody took care of you, or if you were the last child and nobody ever told you no. See, all of that's going to set up some type of experience. So that's why I say what we're shifting is traumatic perspectives. There are 2 links down here at the bottom that you can see where you can actually go and get a lot of information about psychodrama. Who started it, when, where, why, what were some of the problems with it. There's this guy named Marino from out of Europe. And it's funny, they never brought psychodrama into the field with Freud, Jung, Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was around the 60s. You may have remembered I'm Okay, You Okay?
Yes.
That's Carl Rogers group and all of them, all right? But psychodrama wasn't invited in. They kept it out. And many believe the reason it wasn't invited in is because of the one factor they call sociometry. Means that it's about interacting with various relationships. And that's where everything happens. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is psychodrama? It's the practice of role reversal about wounded characters that we protect. And that's what we do with our wounds. We protect them. And how we go off is when somebody accidentally touched that wound. And they may not even know that they touched it, but it's so delicate. So we practice role playing and something called doubling. Doubling is interesting because doubling is, okay, so if I'm one of your alter egos here, I may say what you wanted to say, but never had the courage to say while you're in the center of the stage. So if I'm a little child, and I remember, for example, I asked my mother for a nickel or a dime one day. And she looked at me and she said, "Boy, do you think money grow on trees?"
I think all mothers said that.
Inside, I knew that a dollar came from a tree. Somehow I knew that. Now, and I wanted to say, yeah.
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 I was scared that I'd get the daylights knocked out of me, though. So I kept my mouth shut.
Yes.
And so doubling would be that individual would say it.
Ah.
Yeah, see, somebody would be acting out of me, and they would finally say what I always wanted to say, but I was too afraid to say. So I could hear it, and the fact to see that I wouldn't die once I heard it. Next slide, please. So all of this happens on a constructive stage, okay? This is all set up. We know that it's going to be safe. Why is psychodrama effective? Because we perceive the world subjectively, and perceptions are subject to change. What that means is, when you come into this world, you come in butt naked, no matter who you are. The first voice that you will get accustomed to will be your mother's. By the time you start talking, which is a couple years later, all right, your mother will say something. Now, you're going to have feelings about it, all right, especially if it's because you want something. And if she says no, your feelings are going to go through some changes inside of you. Those changes is where the subjective world happens, okay? So everything we do comes from that subjective world. The only question is, do we have any awareness of it or not? Or are we walking around completely numb to what we are on the inside? The psychodrama stage is designed for change. Okay, psychodrama is not for people who want to think about themselves. That's not what it's for. Psychodrama is for people who have decided, I don't know what this is, and I don't even care anymore. I want to change it. That's a lot different than me coming and checking it out. Although some people will come and do that, and they will see that they are no different than anyone else there. Psychodrama happens in an intentional, constructed, safe place for doing the necessary work in order to change perceptions about self. And it may end up being about others. Because once I understand why I reacted, especially with fear, I no longer blame you. But until I understand what in me was doing it, I'm going to blame you. That's just the way we are. So psychodrama is about teaching us how to step into what we are so we don't have to blame nobody for nothing. We can accept the responsibility. Oh, you know what? I was too weak as a child to stand up to a strong 6'3", 200-pound dad telling me, shut the up. He didn't have to say it that way. He really did. I'm a child. I'm 6 years old. What do you have to yell at a child for? Now, that child had to deal with that, though. And as a culture, we've been pushing this off. We've been calling, oh, that's no big deal. That's just what you have to go through to grow up. Well, if you have to go through being abused as a child to grow up, what will you go through as an adult? You're going to do the abuse that was done to you, because that's all you know. That's what we know, okay? So psychodrama expands one's vision into self and others. We talk about healing the collective, okay? We want to heal the black collective. We want to heal African Americans. We want to heal the black diaspora.
Right, right.
I'm just going to come right out and say it. You can't heal nobody till you heal yourself. And that's how you heal. That's how you heal the world. It's how I talk to you. It's how I talk to you. Do I talk to you in a way that invites you to participate, or do I talk to you with a tonality that pushes you away? So wherever I heal me, I have no reason to be harsh. Wherever I haven't healed me, I'm going to be a little defensive. So whatever I do, that's what I'm going to do to other people. There's not, I don't go along with do unto others as you would have others do unto you. No. You do unto others the way you are. Okay? I mean, that's the truth. All right? Now, we can idealize it all we want, but behavior is about what you do in the moment. And you're going to behave exactly the way you are on the inside. Next slide, please. Well, thank you. You just let me ramble on here with this.
Hey, man, it's opening up some things here.
Okay, so psychodrama is the practice of concretizing, and I'm going to explain that word, a felt sense about an issue where you magnify the issue and you recreate the emotional flavor that created the trauma. Okay, so let's go. All right. My brother used to beat me up all the time. I didn't do nothing. He just had a thing that he would beat me up. And he would yell at me. So, as we create the stage, somebody's going to be my brother. And their voice is going to sound like it's putting me down. And then somebody else is going to stand behind me. And they're going to say everything that I always wanted to say to my brother, but I was always too afraid. Then somebody else is going to be my mother and father who didn't come to my rescue. Okay?
Yeah.
They just let me grow and deal. That's just being part of being a brother. Well, why does getting beat up by your older brother part of being a brother? That really doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So no one is understanding the trauma that's happening to us on a day-to-day basis. And matter of fact, the American society has already accepted trauma as a normative. It's a normal thing to happen. You're supposed to grow up with trauma. That doesn't make any sense. You're supposed to grow up learning how to love yourself, but instead we grow up believing, well, trauma is natural, especially for the black man.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, imagine what that had to do to your psyche when you began to first hear that. So concretizing, the piece that's important in psychodrama is when all of these alter egos are set up by your family, your sister, brother, da-da-da-da, and they all talk at one time. It's like literally you're hearing 15 people talk. Well, when you think about it, how many voices do you hear in your head? Okay? And that's exactly what they're mimicking. That interaction is enough to emotionally shock you back into the PTSD space emotionally. Now, physically, you're not there because you may be 45 years old. This happened when you were 10 or 11. But it determined how you would interact with all men for the rest of your life. Your brother beating you up, okay? So concretizing is an important step because it means that the feelings are going to be almost as if they're the same thing that was happening way back then. And it's from that space that the individual gets to make another choice. They may see their weakness. They may see their brokenness. They may see their shame. They may see how afraid they are. But they will also have the opportunity, watch this, to tap into their inner child and look at the inner child and go, how do you feel about this? And that inner child might go, this is some, and from there, they may feel their actual strength. So psychodrama addresses the inner child, the physical body, the mental body, and the spiritual body. So there's a lot that's being covered there. So concretizing is making it come alive, is what I like to say.
What do you mean about the emotional flavor? I like that term.
Yeah, the emotional flavor is the same thing. It's like, okay, how did you feel? Okay, we're all men. How did you feel when you suffered your first heartbreak? There's a flavor to it, right?
There's a flavor to it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what it takes, so in order to recreate that flavor in the group, you will have to tell the director and the environment what happened. Not only physically, but what were you afraid of? And maybe what were you hoping for that never happened? So they recreate that. That's the flavor.
Okay.
So these elements of this flavor, for example, there are certain things that are always present throughout the whole workshop. Now, how long does a workshop last? You might be gone 12, 15 hours. Okay, you might stop at 10 hours. But it's not just going to be a one-day thing. You may look at a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and you spend the most of each one of those days watching other people and you participating on the stage. And so these are just merely technical terms. Space, that's the place where the protagonist, that's the person who's acting out their scenario, okay? That's where they do their thing. The protagonist is the person with the issue that's playing it out. Okay. Auxiliary ego, mother, father, sister, brother, sister, okay, girlfriend, husband, wife. Director, that's the therapist. Audience, that's everybody. So these 5 elements are always there.
Okay.
In psychodrama. That's all that was.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next slide, please.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, the problem. Why do we have a problem with psychodrama? Why do we have a problem with therapy? Why is it that more black people do not go into therapy? What's the reason? Okay, one, the cost, okay? It's not cheap paying $75 to $150 to $250 an hour. Then, insurance, okay? Will your insurance have it? And if your insurance has it, who do you have to go to? Do you want to go to a therapist that look like you? Or do you want to go to a therapist that may not even know that they represent white supremacy? I'll just be right out and say it, because some therapists do not know. And if you don't know that and you walk in there and you're getting ready to reveal some of your deep, deep stuff, your help is a long way off.
Exactly, yeah.
So I got these statistics out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2015. If 86% of all psychologists in the U.S. are white, only 5%, or 4% are black and African American. So what does that mean? Where do these 4% reside? You're going to find them in your big cosmopolitan areas, okay? So there's a problem. There's not enough people out here in this particular profession to even help us. Now, when you take this 86% of all psychologists, let's say that's 86,000.
Okay.
And then you turn around and ask them, how many of you know how to conduct psychodrama workshops? You're going to be heartbroken, because that number is going to be somewhere between 1% and 3%. It's that few. People in the United States have gotten accustomed to talk therapy. Talk therapy does not make you interact socially. All your problems, all of our problems have come from social interaction with others, not just with one person. It wasn't just my wacky mom, okay? Because my daddy was there. He didn't stop her from being wacky. Now, what does that say? There was my mother, my brother, there was my grandma, there was my granddaddy. How did they all interact with mom? So finding people like us to help us is a real big problem. And we have to make a decision regarding that. Do we know what it takes to find someone to help us, regardless if they look like us or not? And that's a scary move. Because if you don't know what you're doing, chances are you're not going to get the help that you want, or you won't be open to it. Next slide, please. According to the National Institute of Health, many but not all women of color prefer to engage a therapist of their race or ethnicity. Sort of common sense.
Got you.
A recent study shows the benefit. Psychodrama was not designed, even though Moreno was white, and he lived over, where was he at, Sweden or someplace, Norway, I think. Moreno was not a bigot, and I don't know why he wasn't a bigot, I'll be honest, given where he came from. But he understood this. But what he really understood was that trauma knows no color.
So true.
And then, in order for example, if I am a white slave owner and you are my slave, The hard piece for people to figure out and understand is, how is the slave owner undergoing as much trauma as the slave? But in order for the slave owner to continue doing what they're doing, they had to have been traumatized. See, trauma is having an experience that is so heavy that you cannot process it in that moment. The experience and the emotional feelings that are going around it is more than you can handle. So if you're 7 and you got boys 18 years old hitting on you, there's not much you can do. If you're a child 3, 4 years old and that mom and dad is hitting you more than 3 or 4 times, there's really nothing you can do. You are being traumatized, okay? So anybody, anywhere can be traumatized. And people have to, and I think the hardest part for blacks to understand is that the type of trauma that has happened to whites may look different, but the effects are the same. They had to experience a cognitive dissonance. DeGry, in her book, Post-Traumatic Stress Syndrome, she speaks to this, that this cognitive dissonance is a way for me to allow myself to conduct behaviors that will harm you, that I know are harmful to you, but I don't have to feel it. That's trauma. You see, you have to traumatize yourself in order to be able to do that. In order for me to hurt you, I have to create something inside of me to separate from you. I have to tell myself a lie. Oh, you black. Well, if you black, you're stupid, you're short, you're smart, you don't have enough money, da, da, da. All of that. These are all lies. But the purpose of it is to allow me to create a dissonance, a distance almost between you and I, so I can inflict harm on you without feeling bad about it.
It's like almost goes to that saying, well, at least in my opinion, that saying, why do they hate us?
Yeah, they don't hate us, they hate themselves.
Yeah.
And we don't understand that because we don't understand trauma.
Because we didn't do anything to them.
Precisely.
Yes.
So it's not us that they hate. Have they victimized us in many ways? Yes. But when you get into the trauma, they were traumatized before they even knew us. And all we've done, and we haven't understood, is how we've perpetuated their trauma in ourselves. So there's 2 battles going on. There's the institution of white supremacy, and then there's the institution of trauma. And I think it really comes down to which one you want to pay attention to, because they're not both the same, even though the white supremacy will have come out of the trauma. The trauma did not come out of the white supremacy. It was there first. So understanding what we're dealing with, I think, is complicated and on a social thing. So then when you go and become an individual and you're just looking at you, because I say in order for me to love me, I gotta love what I dislike about me. I gotta love what I'm ashamed of about me. I have to love what I'm too weak to acknowledge. That's loving me, because if I'm not loving those parts, I'm doing the same thing that caused the pain to those parts. Psychodrama helps you bring all of this together without blame, shame, or guilt. So,
We got about 4 minutes.
we got about 4 minutes. Okay, so I think we get the general idea. Let's switch the sides. Let's move on to the next slide. That, excuse me, we create our own problem even in finding help. So the whole purpose of the psychodrama, what will it end up being? It lets you tell a traumatic experience through healing in such a way that you invite another person who's listening to you to heal themselves. Now, you can't make nobody do that. You see what I'm saying? So there has to be something authentic in your voice. There has to be something natural that you're speaking of. And what that natural is you're speaking of the brokenness that we experience from not having the connection that we want. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
That's what psychodrama is all about. The only thing we've ever wanted to do is connect. We wanted to connect with mom, dad, girlfriend, husband, wife, son, daughter, co-worker, friend, brother, sister. We've always wanted to connect, and that's where we have experienced trauma, is in our connections. So trauma originates through relationships, and now there's the trauma that happens from me interacting with Ben, but then there's the trauma that happens just with me, with my inner child, my physical body, mind, and soul. These are the relationships that are painful as we grow. And that's what psychotherapy is aimed at dealing with. It's not aimed at dealing with white supremacy. I'm not going to lie. It don't care about white supremacy. What it cares about is the trauma that would even lead to something called white supremacy. So we are in relationship with those 4 pieces, but we're also in relationship with our woundedness. And we can't get away from it. So it's learning how to, oh yeah, this is a wound. I have this. I will carry this. I don't have to let this run how I'm going to do things. I can acknowledge it. I know it hurt. Yes, it did hurt. But I had a lot of misconstruction. I had a lot of misinformation about it. I had put blame and blame and blame, and I didn't understand. Well, now that I understand, it doesn't have a charge. I'm still wounded. It's still a weak spot, but it doesn't have a charge, so I don't have to fight anything. That's the change. So now, when I sit across from you, and you may say something without even knowing, you're saying the same thing that my father said, the same way. I don't have to react to it. I'm done with it. Yeah, it's a wound. I've cleaned it. I've nurtured it. I care for it. I love it enough to become it instead of pretending that it's not there. Next slide. I think we're almost done with them.
Okay, yeah.
Are we done?
We got about 15 seconds.
Okay, 15 seconds with next slide, and that should be it. So everyone gets wounded. There's nobody on the planet that doesn't get wounded, minor, major, and it's about healing the relationship with yourself so that when someone else sees you, they want to connect. Because that's what we want. We want to connect with other people. But if the other person that looks at us, if they don't like what they see and feel, they're not going to want it. So this is about making yourself wantable in a loving way.
All right. On that,
All right.
we thank the audience for watching. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.